Hello and welcome back to your favorite live show, none other than hashtag this just in. If you've seen the preview or if you're watching right now, you know we have a star-studded cast for one of the best world championships ever. Sorry guys, I've got to start with a newcomer, my guy Daniel Blake, Jamaican, because you have to have a Jamaican for this show. Host of Love FM, or sorry, Sports Talk. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on. And how are you tonight?
I'm great, and it's great to be on someone else's podcast. It gives a fresh feeling.
Feels weird to be on the other side of it, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I'm certainly gonna love it for sure.
Well, we know Blaine Spencer loves being here because he was just here last week, and now he's smiling ear to ear because we're going to talk about something that he loves, seeing these American men dominate. But Blaine, how has it been?
I've been well, just trying to keep myself engaged, because I'm always on this just in, just trying to keep myself ready to take down Justin Marvel as always.
Oh, not tonight, though. I am in the host role and I won't have much to say because our co-host happened to be in Eugene, Oregon herself, none other than Marsha Boyce, taking in every single moment. Marsha, how was it?
Oh, it was great. My voice is finally back, so looking forward to a good show.
Well, it has been a week since the historic World Championships in the US, as Marsha said, so she did indeed get her voice back. But three world records, people, major upsets, and a moment of glory for Barbados, but we will touch on that. So we'll start with the newcomer, Daniel Blake. Many are touting this as the greatest World Championships ever. How do you see it?
I don't know if it's my Jamaican bias, but I don't think so. I definitely think that it's one of the best because we're in 2022, so a lot of the times and distances are amongst the best ever because of natural evolution. But when I think about 2009, that really stands out to me simply because you had Usain Bolt, that was his greatest year as an athlete, 9.58 in the 100, 19.19 in the 200, and then the men's 4x1 breaking the world record. But you also had some great performances from Shelly and Fraser, Pryce in the women's 100 meters, Melaine Walker in the 400 hurdles. You had Alison Felix and Veronica Campbell-Brown, who had a very competitive 200-meter race. And then the field events were pretty competitive as well. I think this year, could have been better, maybe due to the atmosphere and the overall vibe around it. So it's definitely one of the best, yes. But just for me, 2009 just stands out as the best world champs of all time.
Bias though, so I'm gonna ask Blaine. As Blaine watched his American men dominate the one, as in sweeping the podium, and then return to do the same thing in the two. So, Blaine, from your American eyes, was this indeed the best world championships, considering it was the first on American soil?
I mean, from an American bias, you got to say yes, right? I know Daniel's got his Jamaican bias. I'll bring out my American bias. But statistically speaking, let's look at some of the times, though. Like the women's 100 down to the wire with Fraser Pryce and Shericka Jackson. The 200, same, different order, reverse order, but same result, very tight. The women's 800 went down to a photo finish. You have the men's 1500, that was a total upset. You have the 400 hurdles, that was a total upset in the men. Like American sweep was the biggest storyline, which it probably was in the 100 and 200, trying to reclaim the thrones, so to speak. But I really don't think we haven't had such a long time when it comes to the sprints, that it really just showcased how Hayward Field might be one of the fastest tracks, and not just in the United States, but in the world. With some of the times that they were putting out there, it was very electric to see. And even if it wasn't a world record, you were seeing splits that were extremely fast as well. So I personally would say it has to be up there. as one of the best world championships ever.
A lot of people come doubting this show wondering what is the stake and claim, but I want to let you all know that this Justin had somebody on the spot. Unfortunately, of course, we didn't pay, so it came out of Marsha Boyce's pocket. But all the same, she was there at Hayward Field, and I trust her if she tells me, was it the best ever or wasn't it?
Well, honestly, it depends on who you ask. If you ask my friend Victoria Appiah, who accompanied me, she'll tell you it was the best ever because we got to see it. So that's her estimation. Like Blaine, if you look at the stats, you had 3 world records being set and you had 13 championship records. Now, in comparison, just 1 year ago at the Olympics, which was hailed as the best ever athletics competition, you also had 3 world records and at that time, 12 Olympic records being set. So statistically, it really was a good championship. It was the first one on US soil, so the hype was there. There was that buzz. It was the first one in a redeveloped Hayward Field, new venue, redevelopment completed in 2020. So there was that hype there as well. Even the distance races like steeplechase, I've never been so excited for the conclusion of a 10,000 meters, like 10,000 meters, and it was still pace coming down to the end. So there was that element of it in terms of like 3 world records and 13 championship records, numerous area records and national records as well. However, as a spectator, it could be a little bit debatable. As Daniel mentioned, the atmosphere in the stadium wasn't to the peak that you would anticipate for a world championship, particularly comparing it to, Doha, London, even Berlin that we've had. So the atmosphere wasn't there. And you often wonder too, for example, this was probably one of the first major championships that I could remember to that extent as it relates to world championships where you had major finals being run in broad daylight. So, maybe if it was a nighttime event, where you get to see the lights and the laser show and the fireworks, which would have added more to it, if that would have raised the height somewhat, because it was a bit interesting, big showpiece and the sun bright, bright, bright high up in the sky outside hot. Like when the event finished, you felt like, okay, but I ain't ready to go home yet. Outside still bright, So from that perspective, in terms of the atmosphere, it could have been a bit more engaging, for lack of a better word. But then in terms of access to athletes for spectators on the ground, we would definitely say it was the best. I don't think there's been a world championship where you could call them that close to athletes. The athletes village was right across from the venue, the training venue. The warm-up track was like literally right there. You could hold over a fence and wave at people on the other side. You could take pictures. So you really got a lot of access to the actual athletes for track and field fans. So it depends on who you ask, but I would say though, based on the stats, it really was a good event.
So, like,
Justin, I just got a quick question for Marsha. I've heard from people that I've talked to is that the location was a huge factor of why the atmosphere was not as electric as what most world championships are. It wasn't in a main city. You're in Oregon. You're not like even in the main city of the state of Oregon, which would be Portland.
Yeah.
Do you think location played a role there, even though that's where the U.S. championships are always held, are always at Hayward? So
you are trumping the cards. We are going to get to that because
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Brain, what am I supposed to do?
Unfortunately, in Brothwick, that 110 final, you're jumping the gun. We're going to get there.
All right. Hold
So Blaine, I'll stick a pin there. Come back to that one.
Get there. Trust me, Marsha. Marsha knows what she's doing. So Blaine, then since you're so eager to get in on this program, I'm going to ask you right now. You've had Sydney McLaughlin's. Well, that's all I can say. Well, you had Tobi Amusan's world record. He won 10 hurdles. Christian Ches, stunning upset in the discus. You have Noah Lyles, but for you, what was that one defining performance of the entire World Championships in Eugene?
I mean, it's hard to argue that it's not Sydney McLaughlin, of how she absolutely dismantled the field in the 400 hurdles and made it absolutely non-existent, and basically putting the 400 hurdles event in a stratosphere that at this point, even in her post interview, that she might give up on the hurdles at this point and go try something else, because that's how dominant it was. And you thought she was going to have maybe I didn't think I thought she was going to win. I didn't think it was going to be that convincing. I thought Femke Bol from the Netherlands, as well as potentially Dalila Muhammad, was going to have something to say about it. Maybe not. I didn't think they were going to win, but I thought they were going to make it look like it actually was. She absolutely crushed the field. And if her time, everyone would have put her 7th in the open final of the 400. 7th. And she had big track. And I also have a lot of bias. I was a hurdler when I was still an track athlete. So like that's always been my bread and butter and what I've always been drawn to. But what she did absolutely made me feel so inferior as an athlete, though, too, of just like, it was absolutely mind-boggling to me what she did. And I have to go with McLaughlin. I know I rambled way longer than what the answer entitled to be, but I don't think it was much of a question that it was McLaughlin's performance.
Oh, but Daniel may have something else to say, because he may be looking at Shericka Jackson, or is it really just Sydney and no one else can compare?
Yeah, I think it's hard to argue against it. Going 50.68 in the 400-meter hurdles is just really unheard of. And as Blaine said, the manner that she did it in was absolutely spectacular. I think next time maybe Femke Bol will probably not do the mixed relays before, so that when it gets to that 400-meter hurdles final, she can be a little bit more competitive. But if there was like a runner-up, I would go for Shericka Jackson, that 21.45 championship record in the 200. And I say that because up until 2019, people were asking World Athletics to remove some of Flojo's records, simply because we thought it was untouchable. And now that she did 21.45, just short of that 21.34 from Flojo, it just puts into perspective that doing that in 2022, in just her second year doing this event competitively, you can't imagine that when the World Champs comes around next year, the record is going to go. And to be very honest with you, in the semifinals, when she had that positive 2.0 win and she did 21.67, I believe, you can imagine what happens if she actually went all out there. So that would definitely be number 2 for me, but you certainly can't argue against Sydney's performance.
Because as far as it goes, that was the third fastest time in the, well, at least third fastest legal time in the history of the event. And we're talking about the event that was contested previously by Usain Bolt and Michael Johnson, and not to forget, Daniel's namesake in Johan Blake. But does, Sydney really put herself above everyone else?
I could easily say ditto to all three of you, because in ranking my top performances, I actually had all three of those. I had Sydney Shericka Jackson's performance in that 200, and I had Noah Lyles's performance in the 200 meter, but in the context as well of the US doing essentially a double sweep, which you don't really see in the sprint. So if we were to move away from an individual performance as a team, because the US did win this inaugural team championship that they had for the very first time, from a team perspective, being able to sweep both the men's 100 and 200 meters is something that you don't usually see at a major event as well. But Sydney McLaughlin's world record would be my number 1. I anticipated that she would have broken the record based on her performance at Nationals just a few weeks prior, but I really did not anticipate that level of a performance for her to shatter the record by almost a second.
Absolutely crazy. So Marsha, don't go very far, because we're talking about performances, and yet we haven't mentioned Tobi Amusan's historic run in that 100 meter hurdles for women. So in terms of upsets, what was the biggest one? Was it that? Was it Ches? discus? Was it the sweep by the American men in the 1 and the 2? Or was it something even more stunning? The American women finding a way to beat the Jamaican women in that 4-by-1 relay?
Why this one was a hard one for me to decide which was the best upset, because for me there were a few, so I couldn't just pin it down to one single upset. But for sure, the world record by Tobi Amusan of Nigeria really took the entire stadium by surprise. It took her by surprise, because when the clock stopped, everybody was like, wait, world record? Because you know, sometimes you see the flash time and you wait for it to correct a bit, right? You notice, okay, the time is staying. What is? And then she herself was like, huh? Because in one of the race interviews, she was saying she didn't realize, even though she felt that she was in the best form of her life, she didn't necessarily feel that she was going that quickly. So that one, I remember I was recording that race to get my angles for the final, right? So I was just recording to make sure, okay, when I pan, this is what it's gonna look like, and then boom, end up with a world record, well, part of a world record on camera. So that one for me was a major shock, because going into the meet, nobody had her as the gold medal favorite, far less the person to win the to break a record. And you're talking a pretty decent time, 12.12. She actually ran faster in the final, but of course the win wasn't legal there at 12.06. So it'll be interesting to see more of her. But that was definitely one of the shocks on the day. The entire stadium was like, did we really just see what we thought we saw? Because with Sydney always knocking at the door, the previous records were their own. So you kind of expected them, they were in with a chance to break their own records. But this one was definitely a surprise.
Yeah, I forgot. We haven't even mentioned Duplantis all episode long, but we're going to get to him. Hopefully. Same thing, Daniel. Like, I see you there smiling when she was talking about Amusan. So are you in agreement?
I would definitely say it was a shock, because Jasmine Camacho Quinn coming into the championship was the favorite. Brittany Anderson as well was knocking on the door, and then obviously having the world record holder prior to the semifinals, Kendra Harrison. So for Tobi to have done what she did, spectacular. I think that the biggest upset, though, not as a Jamaican bias perspective, but just in general, was that women's 4x1. I think that if you were a betting person, that is one event that you could definitely put your money on. Shelly and Fraser, Pryce, Sherika Jackson, Elaine Thompson, Hira, and then you add to that Kemba Nelson, who was one of the fastest women this year. You just expected that was gold and potentially a world record. And then you were looking at the American team, and no disrespect to them, but when you looked at it on paper, you thought, oh, they're no competition. But it's, the relays and the hurdles are those events where nothing is ever equal. If you don't execute efficiently, you're just not going to win. And unfortunately, even though they had some very good splits, some of the baton passes weren't great, and the Americans, did their job. So I know a lot of people lost money on that one, so I would say that was the biggest upset.
Because my
you should know better by now. You don't bet on sports, Justin, man. We've been doing this too long.
Downstairs, I mean, the $50 he thought I was going to the grocery with really went somewhere else. So, what was the upset of these championships?
Wow, I mean, they probably already took the top two, in my opinion, and what Amusan did, as well as what the U.S. did in that 4x1 on the women's side. I mean, there's a couple more that I at least want to highlight, especially on the men's 4x1 side. That's the one thing that the United States hasn't figured out what to do when it comes to that. Their handoffs are never right. They were their field of four, clearly the best, and it wasn't even close. But Canada had four great handoffs, and when you give Andre DeGrasse a lead, regardless of what he's been through, once he's in front, he is closer when he is in front. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But you could also go with Jake Whiteman in the 1500, upsetting Ingebrigtsen. Like, everyone thought Jakob Ingebrigtsen was going to destroy the 1500 field because they thought his bigger challenge was going to be winning the 5000, right? Because he was trying to do the double. And Whiteman surprising him towards the end there in the 1500 was something unique. If I had to pick one, I would probably have to go with Amusan, just because of, honestly, she was probably predicted to make the final, but she wasn't predicted to be anywhere near contention in the final, in my opinion, even though she had, again, like Marsha said, she was having one of her best seasons. I personally thought she was still a year or two away of being on that precipice, and she had a world record in her semifinal and then an unofficial world record in the final. So I think Amusan's the best way, but I did want to highlight those other two as well. I don't think the men's 4x1 was as big of an upset because that's the one thing that they have shown that they're just going to mess up. So.
What they didn't mess up was those individual races in 1 and 2. It has been a long time coming because a certain countryman of Daniels has been dominant for over 10 years, but he is gone now, and it seems, Blaine, that you are back. Are the American men, I'm going to start with you. I'm surprised you don't have a flag or jersey on or some sort of Nike paraphernalia somewhere knocking on.
Got out of a work meeting. I couldn't wear any of my U.S. stuff, so...
You won. Not only did you win the 1 and the 2, you swept the podium. Are the American men back to dominating the sprints?
I wouldn't say dominating, but I think they're dominating is such a fine word in track and field because it's such a thin margin. Like, if you really look at like the time, like if you look, I mean, in the 100. The Olympic champion Jacobs has been battling injuries all year, and he couldn't even get himself into the final and actually withdrew. I mean, the man, I think, only finished a couple races this season if you actually go through his entire stats. But I mean, for the 200, the 100 and the 200, we were clear. I mean, in the 200, it was a little bit tighter with Van Bule. I can't say his name right, but thank you. But in the 100, we were it was the three of them, Curly and Bromell and Bray, pretty far and ahead of, and especially in a 100, hundreds of seconds are actually a fair, or even a tenth of a second is a lot of time in the 100 and even in the 200. So I think the 100 we have kind of put ourselves in a spot where we have 4 guys that are going to be in the forefront of the 100 for a while, even though Christian Coleman didn't have a great performance. The man is one of the greatest starters. My light's gone out of the blocks you can argue in history. I've never seen a guy who has a better 30 or 40 in a 100 or even a 60 than in Christian Coleman. So I think we're close. We're right there. I think, again, it's all going to be about health, and that's the issue with all track and field. But I think we're in a very good spot when it comes to right now. And don't forget, we won the 4 too. So we did a clean sweep of those short distance events in comparison to everything else.
Is being very, 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 I say humble.
I'm trying to be a cordial reporter, man, not a fan.
we're not here in our professional capacities right now, so you can let loose, because I'm going to throw it at Daniel now, and it has to hurt because he has seen the dominance for so long. Are you now on the other side of it, Daniel? Are the Americans now back to dominating the sprints?
I wouldn't say back to dominating. I would have to see if this is a trend up until at least 2025. As Blaine mentioned, we didn't have Marcel Jacobs in the 100. Andre de Grasse was obviously far from fit. Oman Yala, who has been one of the most consistent 100-meter runners this year, he had his visa issues, only arrived on the day, and that was impossible for him to work out. So what the men did in the 100 was fantastic. But you think about Jamaican / Seville, still very young and still rising. So I don't know if they'll be able to dominate the men's 100. They would have to prove that the 200 meters is something that they could potentially dominate for a while, simply because Arian Knighton's still a teenager, and what he's doing right now, you can imagine, even though track and field isn't like that, you have a lot of variables, but if he continues to develop in the right way, I see him breaking Bolt's record and possibly going below 19.1. Noah Lyles has been, the best 200-meter runner. So I think those two will continue that rivalry, even though you do have Fan Boulay, possibly Jereem Richards and several others who would contest. So I definitely think the men's 200 meters is where they'll shine for a very long time, but I would have to wait and see what happens in Championships Pryce 2024 and then again in 2025 before I can say that they're dominating the sprints altogether.
Or are you going to lean?
Yes. No, I agree. I will say they had an excellent meet in the sprints, but I won't go as far as to say, they're back to that place of dominance. Because as the others mentioned, we had some people who weren't at their best, some who came up late. So they had a really good meet. You can't take that away from them, sweeping the 1 and the 200. To dominate now, you need to be consistent over a long period of time. And that is where the difficulty comes. And as Daniel mentioned, Oblique Seville, I'm really excited to see how he will develop. I'm very excited to see, while I'm excited to see how Arian Knighton will develop, have high hopes for him. If I can get Joseph Famboulay as start coach, I would be even more excited to see what he can really produce, because he has an awful start, race after race after race, and is constantly running from behind. So while the Americans can enjoy this period, I am actually excited to see the rivalries that will emerge. We have the World Junior Champion looking to defend his title from Botswana, who's currently in Cali. Like, we have a lot of youngsters coming through who are also looking really good. So I don't expect this type of domination, for lack of a better word, to continue, let's say, for the next 3-4 years. They had a really good meet, but we'll see some different names coming through as we progress.
I love your mention, the rivalry, because now I'm going to talk about it. On the other side, it seems like the Jamaican women don't plan to let go of this mantle anytime soon. And you're just unearthing one after another, because now with Sharika Jackson doing something never done before with her sub-split in the 1, 2, and 4. Obviously, now Shelly and Fraser Pryce define time, define modern medicine and motherhood. And Elaine Thompson here, who in my estimation before this meet, I had pegged, and I'm about to say, I thought she was the greatest female sprinter of all time. Rest in peace, Ojo. So I'm going to go to Jamaican here, Daniel. I even forgot the question. Has your country produced the greatest? Is it safe to say, can it comfortably come right here on the spot and say that your country has now produced the greatest female sprinters ever seen, probably with the exception of Flojo?
I think you could have said that after 2016, simply because when you look at what we've done, not just with Shelly and Elaine and most recently Sharika, we've had Veronica Campbell-Brown, who was our sprint queen here, what she did in 2004 and onwards. And then even though Karen Stewart and Sharon Simpson weren't constant gold medalists, they were literally competing with the likes of Veronica Campbell-Brown and Shelly and Fraser Pryce. They have some of the fastest times ever. And then if we were to even go back a little further, you have people like Marilyn Otti and Beverly McDonald. And yeah, so when you look at all these stars that we've produced, it's been absolutely fantastic. And then, in the next few years, when you have young stars like Tina Clayton and Brianna Liston, who are already on the verge of running sub 11 and sub 23s and those things, you have to say that we have done extremely well in producing the best women sprinters. I think that the Americans, again, I think it's something about consistency. consistency. I think Carmelita Jetta was pretty consistent, but when you look at people like Tori Bowie, she was obviously in a competitive era. Gail Devers was obviously fantastic during her time. Marion Jones, who went through that, drug-related situation, so a lot of her medals and times were scrapped. So I think that maybe, if the Americans were able to produce them more on a consistent basis, I would throw Allyson Felix out there, even though people more know her as a 400-meter star, but what she did in the 200 can't be forgotten. But I definitely think that what Jamaican women have done on the sprinting scene in the 100 and 200 certainly can't be compared.
Same question, Blaine. Do you give Jamaica the edge here in producing the greatest female sprinters?
Without question. And like Daniel said, it's the consistency, and it's not like it's been the same people every time. You have Veronica Campbell. I mean, Shelly Ann Fraser Pryce, she can do no wrong. I mean, she might be going until she's 45 and still have one of the best starts in track and field history. It's the same with like Christian Coleman on the men's side, but they have the longevity. They produce year in. It doesn't matter who it is. They could have somebody coming out of nowhere every once in a while, and yet they're right there competing for a podium. And you can make the argument that maybe the Jamaican trials is probably harder for them than the actual world championships or the Olympics. It's based on how they're clean sweeping everything. So, and there's no argument against this. So short and sweet. And it's very much without question that Jamaica has the best sprinters on the female side without easily.
When you mentioned Shelly Ann Fraser Pryce, none other than Mommy Rocket herself, you should see smile on Marsha's face, because I know that is a personal favorite of hers. She may not say that publicly, but I know her personally. So Marsha, I feel like you don't even have to ask this question, but same question.
Well, actually, my favorite Jamaican sprinter would be, honestly, Veronica Campbell Brown, because I felt as if I grew up with Veronica, when Veronica competed at Carifta here in Barbados. We were officials at the meet. So Veronica Campbell Brown will always be my absolute fave. In terms of, I know sometimes you don't like when everybody agrees on the show, but we're going to agree on this one because there's no denying that Jamaica has produced, the best female sprinters. We're looking at, you swept the 100 at World Championships. You did the same thing at Olympics, but you can go right back, as Daniel mentioned, to 2008 with that 1-2 in Beijing with Shelly Ann Fraser Pryce, Sharon Simpson, and Karen Stewart. So this isn't anything new. You've had that consistency before. And I just decided to go back through the numbers. 12 of the top 20 women's 100-meter times belong to either Shelly Ann Fraser Pryce or Elaine Thompson-Herah. Just those two. 12 of the top 20 times. 9 of the top 20 200 Jackson are Elaine Thompson-Herah. Bear in mind, Sharika has only been running this event consistently for the last 2 years. She already has multiple of the top all times in that 200-meter. I mean, if you go a little bit further back, then you will get Merlene Ottey, a little further, Grace Jackson. All of them are in that top 20. So this domination is, yes, Grace Jackson is still in the top 20 if you're looking at individual performances. So, this domination isn't nothing new. As Daniel mentioned, there is that level of consistency. If we're looking at all time in terms of performances, if we take Flojo out, we have Elaine Thompson-Herah at number 2, Shelly Ann Fraser Pryce at number 3, Elaine 10:54, Shelly Ann 10:06, Sharika Jackson at number 7, Merlene Ottey at number 9 in that top 10 best female. I mean, the numbers don't lie. I know sometimes people don't like the stats, but it's right here for you when you're counting off these performances. And like Daniel, I am excited for the future. The Clayton twins, Brianna Liston, Kivonna Davis. Like, I am excited to see these athletes coming through. I have to watch them tomorrow on the stream for Cali to see how that plays out. But it seems as if particularly females, there is that desire, that hunger to keep the trend going. No generation of females will want to be the generation that lets down the truth, so to speak. So it's almost like you have that constant production factory coming through. Hopefully the men can get back there, but definitely excited to see, I think we've been blessed, the era we've been born, to see the athletes that we've been able to see with our very own eyes. And I think it is only going to get better.
It's just so weird, right? So first, to Marsha's point, right? You know me, I'm a numbers guy. Facts, not feelings. I don't feel emotionally sentiment that the numbers don't like. But I don't understand it. Like, tradition has to start somewhere, but there's something to be said about tradition. And you mentioned it, Marsha, like it's almost like we have this tradition in sprinting that we can't let down, that we have to live up to. I just don't get it. Like, it doesn't matter who, it doesn't matter where. For whatever reason, Jamaica will produce a female sprinter out of nothing. And with the resources, I just don't get it. Maybe one of these days, Daniel could do a thesis to me why this is the case, where a country that does not produce the numbers like others continues to produce the sprinters like none other. But go ahead, Daniel, to ask you about.
Yeah, I really wish I could explain it, because a lot of what we discuss here, especially in our sports shows, is that we are punching above our weight like 20 times. If you actually come to a lot of our meets and so forth and see how our athletes train, you'd be shocked that we have some of the fastest men and women alive. Some of our athletes don't even have a proper nutrition program. We don't have proper recovery. It's been getting better over the years, but when you look at the resources that other countries have, if Jamaica had it, we'd probably be on another level. Or there's also the argument that because we don't have those resources, we are driven even more to prove people wrong. So it's very hard to even try and put a finger on it. I remember when Usain Bolt had broken his records, and everybody from the BBC to the CNN, they were actually going to the farmers and asking, what do they put in the yams and those things. When we just had a spectacular athlete who just broke through the ranks. So it's even more special seeing our women, and to an extent our men, dominate internationally, because just looking what we have to work with here, it just blows our mind just as much as yours.
Blaine, I know this is coming a half an hour late than you wanted, but here's your question, or the answer you wanted from the very first segment. So I'm going to start with the person that can likely answer it for you. Marsha from the Brady Bunch. Holding a major athletic championships in Eugene, Oregon, in the United States, given the size of the venue, given the situation with visa, given the fact that, Blaine, but reality situation, track and field in the United States for sports is way down the ladder. Marsha, was it a mistake, major meet like the World Championships in Eugene, Oregon?
I wouldn't say it was a mistake, because at the end of the day, you had a successful championship in terms of performances, etc. So I wouldn't say it was a mistake. Was it the best decision? Again, that is debatable. And we're not always in the back rooms to know the extent of the decision making that goes on. But on the surface, you get it. If you're going to have a major track and field championship in the US, and we're not talking Olympics, we're talking track and field specifically, then it has to be in track from Eugene. Like, it just makes sense. This is where all the major events are held: nationals, Prefontaine Classic, etc. That's the home of track and field in the USA. So I get it from that perspective. The history, the legacy, it's a new stadium, etc., etc., etc. Makes sense on paper. However, even though the meet was a successful one, there are certain issues that you mentioned that we can't necessarily ignore. One, the location. Eugene is not the easiest place in the US to get to. So it is a very difficult place to get to. And that impacted some of the spectators. That had a lot of impact for certain people. In terms of the size, as Blaine mentioned, the city itself is not a big city. Portland is a major city in Oregon. But then the venue itself is a small a small venue, which then presented a lot of challenges. So from a city perspective, there wasn't a lot of accommodation. And anybody who goes to meets in Oregon, and Eugene specifically, you know that finding accommodation is a challenge for a major event. And that was the case this time around. A lot of people decided to go to Portland and take the 1 hour and a half, 2 hour drive in. Some people stayed in Springfield, some people stayed in Criswell, some people decided it doesn't make sense because they can't find any place to stay. Because there wasn't a lot of accommodation, the accommodation was very expensive. So you have an expensive plane ticket to get there and very expensive accommodation, which also had an impact. The venue being small, this is probably one of the smallest venues they would have had for a major track and field championship. When you compare it, for example, to Beijing, a capacity of 54,000, or London, a capacity of 60,000. And then you come to Eugene with a capacity of 12, well, let's say 12,000, but upgradable to 24,000. Then you kind of see why the atmosphere wasn't there. But even though the venue was small, you still had empty seats, which was, that's a whole other discussion because tickets are sold out, but you're seeing a lot of empty seats, and that can be very frustrating as well. Then you mentioned the visa issue. It is part and parcel of having a major event in the USA. There will be visa issues. I mean, on the day the meet started, there were almost like 100 officials and athletes who didn't get their visas yet. Some never got them at all. Some got them just a couple hours before the event. Like Daniel mentioned, Ferdinand from Kenya, he landed in Eugene 3 hours before the start of the men's 100-meter final. As someone who had one of the fastest 100-meter times in the world this year, that's not ideal. He did qualify for the semifinals, but when you think about it, going from, it would have been about 5 hours from Kenya to Doha, then 14 hours from Doha to Seattle, then another hour from Seattle and run 100-meter preliminary. That's not ideal. So there were visa issues. Sebastian Coe, he admitted that there are lessons to be learned. We'll see if those lessons will indeed be learned. But from the organizers, they're saying only 1% of the 5,000 odd people who needed visas among the athletes and officials didn't get them. So in the grand scheme of things, 1% is small, but that in itself put a damper on the build-up to the tournament because there was a lot of media coverage of, athletes not being able to get visas, etc. So was it the best idea? I can't say, but I can understand why it was in Eugene, given that, that's Tracktown USA. I went on a bit, but yeah.
No, perfect. Answer your question, Blee.
Perfectly answers it.
So then I have to put the same question towards you, Blaine. You've been in track and field. You've covered track and field. I must assume you've been to Eugene before. Was that a fitting venue for World Championships?
So it's such a touchy subject because they do the U.S. Championships there every year, and it felt like the U.S. they got a better turnout at the U.S. Championships than that you could make the argument that they did on the occasions of some of the World Championship events, right? So like it varied because of how the schedule sets up. It's a little bit different at the U.S. Championships than how the World Champions set up more races, stuff like that, which always plays an effect depending on like work schedules and stuff like that. It's a 2-week event. Unlike U.S. Championships, they kind of cram it in like 4 or 5 days. So again, there's the argument to counter argument. But for me, I did it in my head. I was like, it is Tracktown USA. That you have to at least make the effort of having them in the consideration. And they're one of the fastest tracks in the world when it comes to times. And you knew if it was going to be at Hayward Field that there was going to be people putting on a show, which is what happened. You had the 3 world records. You had the 13 championship records. The times were warranted why it was there, right? But then if you look on the other side, where was it? Los Angeles, that's always a state of having a massive sporting event, and the track and field probably for the Olympics upcoming it's where it's going to most likely be. So you've tested that out and tried to see whether that'll work for the upcoming Olympics in the United States. So there's so many different things that you could have done. I don't think there's any correct answer. For me personally, I'm one that's like, as a track and field person, you're like, yeah, you gotta at least give it a shot at Hayward Field because it's Tracktown USA. But then also if you're just a general fan just trying to follow the event, you're like, it's very difficult to accommodate people, like Marsha said. So it's a very difficult location where you would probably want it maybe in Los Angeles would be more ideal. If that's the first place that pops into my head as a venue.
And the venue is a beautiful venue. Huh? It is a lovely venue. The redevelopment was really, they've modernized the venue. The screens are fantastic. So in terms of a fit for purpose track and field facility, it really is that. The warm-up track is right there, probably not as big as some of the other warm-up tracks that you might have access to. There's also that counter argument of, well, the USA isn't a major track and field, doesn't have a major track and field fan base. Are people going to want to travel to the USA? Would it have looked worse in a bigger venue if people had opted not to travel to the USA as spectators? Because it was an expensive meet. The tickets were some of the most expensive ever. I know some diehard fans who actually opted out because of the ticket price, and they're going to go to Hungary instead. And they've gone to every World Championship within the last X amount of World Championships. They were like, nah, this one is a little bit too much. They're going to opt out. When you factored in the plane fare, the accommodation, and then the event ticket prices, it really was an expensive undertaking for the spectators. But from an athlete perspective, I guess the facility would have worked. And as Blaine mentioned, the track was indeed a fast track.
Same question, Daniel. Good place to host it, or did you have another idea in mind?
Obviously all of those things that Marsha and Blaine mentioned were issues, but I think there are ways to cover some of them up. It's almost like dating in a sense. When you're moving on to somebody else and you meet a new partner, you're not going to find the perfect partner, but you're going to hope that they did the good things that the old partner did and don't do the bad things that the old partner did. So, for example, over the last few major championships, we've seen new features to make not only the watch experience on TV, but the actual fan experience there. So you had the special walkouts, you had the special light shows, you have all of those things. So even if the stadium isn't full, you won't even think about that because, wow, look at all these fireworks, look at all these lights, look at the athletes coming out and dancing and getting the spotlight they deserved. Whereas in Eugene, the athletes were basically, all right, walking up to their lanes and they would just call out their names and the race would go ahead and that's it. And like Marsha had said at the start, I was talking to my great friend Jordan Ford, who was covering it for one of our local broadcasts here. Having a night spectacle is huge. Some people might not understand it, but it's the reason why you have, you do a lot of entertainment type things in the night. Beyonce won't do a world tour and start it at 12 p.m. or when daylight is out. She's going to wait until, there are stars and the moon is out. I felt that a lot of it is like, all right, Shericka Jackson just did that 21.45. It was special, but hold on, the sun is still brighter than ever. Why? You felt like the moon should shine down and those type of things. So even with all that said, I think that they could have copied what some of the other major championships did. I think Doha did a fantastic job. I think last year in Tokyo, they did a spectacular job as well. So I think even though we had the visa issues and those things, I think the actual fan experience, I think the organizers could have done a much better job at it.
Like Daniel was saying, knowing how big US sport can be when you look at NBA, NFL, you expected a little more razzle dazzle, give me a little more sizzle, give me a little more something, because y'all are accustomed to putting on major events, not necessarily major track and field events, major sporting events at that. When you look at the spectacle that is the Super Bowl, for example, which starts in some instances during the daytime, we were laughing because in lieu of fireworks, at one point there was an airplane flyover. Woohoo! You know, like so you really wanted that additional razzle dazzle to make the event feel as grand as it was. But I understand though the time challenges, not to cut you, Justin. Once you're having an event on the West Coast, you're going to have that difficulty because you're catering to you East Coast audiences, European audiences, etc. There's a 3-hour difference. So if the meet ends at 8 o'clock Eugene time, you're already at 11 o'clock heading to midnight on the West Coast. So a later start would have impacted television viewing. So that was also a consideration for the timing of the meet as well.
I was waiting for one of you to mention that because I was like, Marsha should know better. These things are catered towards East Coast audience, every situation, and top of European audiences as well. Got to know your market. So go ahead.
Well, I'm not a fan of that thinking because in every World Championships and every Olympics, you don't really think about that. You know, when Rio was going on, you know, and even Tokyo last year, I had to wake up at 3, 4 a.m. here, and the same would be said about other countries around the world. So if you're trying to appeal to the East Coast or the European market or those things, I don't think you should. I think you should host your event in what you think is the best time possible, and then people will adjust. You know, people don't like waking up at 5 a.m. or staying up until midnight, 1 o'clock to see races. But because we love the sport so much, you know, the fans will do it. So I hope that next time, if they get to host a major championship, that won't be in their thinking. I think you need to just plan your best event possible and then allow everyone else to adjust around you instead of trying to suit these countries in Europe or these countries in Africa or the East Coast of America or those type of things. Just execute your best event possible for the athletes, the fans inside the stadium, and the fans watching around the world.
I would normally agree with you, but with an event in the US with NBC as the host broadcaster, that was never going to happen. Even if you look at the meet schedule was geared toward events that the US could have possibly won a gold medal in, closing. How many world championships have you seen with a women's 400-meter hurdles being the final event on a day's? No, even the event scheduling leaned or length toward, you know, that American audience, that American fan base. So while we as track and field fans know better and we will get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to watch something from Sri Lanka, wherever the meet is being held, with NBC being a major sponsor, being the first major track and field standalone event on US soil, the shots that the broadcasters would have called, yeah, we didn't have a say in that. That's the honest to God truth. As much as we know better and we would have expected better, you gotta remember NBC, for example, love to show things tape delayed. The rest of the world doesn't see it when we get up at 8 o'clock in the morning and they coming back at 8 o'clock at night showing it as if live. Now you can't get away with that when the event is on US soil. You have to show it live. So for me, all of those, thinking about the broadcast side of things, all of those would have been considerations in terms of the timing of the event. Additionally, the lighting at the venue is interesting. There are no major pylons. All of the lighting is around the seating. So Victoria and I were actually trying to figure out if the lighting is actually adequate to run a track and field meet at night. Because on let's say the 300-meter bend, so the distance between the 200-meter start and the 100-meter start, there's actually no lighting on that bend because there are no stands on that side. So we were also wondering maybe the venue can't actually hold a meet in the dead of night either.
Again, when you pay, it's easy for us that's not paying this coverage dollars. And there's no way, as Blaine would tell you, anything that is held in the West Coast of the United States is geared and will be timed so that the East Coast at night is watching it. If you watch any Super Bowl on the West Coast, it's going to start during the day to accommodate those on the East Coast. That's just maybe wrong, but that is how America.
It is wrong, but You know,
I'm not.
we know how they move.
I'm not here to say right or wrong because it's not my money that's being spent, and I don't have to turn and tell advertisers.
The market. It's all about the media market. And New York
Oh,
and Philadelphia
oh,
and Boston are the three biggest markets, arguably, in the world. So
that is what they will tell you. So, Blaine, to close out, this is a personal question for everyone, so I expect to get a different answer for everyone. Blaine, starting with you, final question for the night. What was the most memorable performance of the championships for you?
wow, most memorable. I mean, it's kind of similar to what we've kind of talked about throughout this episode. I'm actually gonna go with. I'm gonna go with actually Canada's upset of the U.S. in the 4x1, just because that was what I was really watching. Like I am a former relay. That's what I'm passionate about, and I know McLaughlin would probably be my other answer. So I'll go with the 4x1 just because of Canada was nowhere near Andre DeGrasse coming off of COVID injury all year. The only one on their squad that even made the final in either of the events was Aaron Brown, and he was the starter for them, and he did not well in the open one. So they were just nowhere. They had no business of being even right there in contention. I mean, but it's always all about the handoffs and stuff like that. And Canada had 4 better handoffs than what the United States had. That last exchange for the United States is going to be one more and over because I can't remember the hand. If it was going to Bracy and the guy, I can't remember the third flag off the top of my head right now, but he falls down because he missed. If anyone who runs track and is watching this episode, anytime you're doing a relay, when they call stick, you want to make sure the hand is solidified before you already give the stick, right? And that's what was happening. He was given the stick, the hand moved, it's ahead of him now, and he's trying to pull it back. The hand's here on the exchange, misses, and then it took them three attempts to get the actual pass. And by that point, Andre DeGrasse is gone, and that's all she wrote. So I'm going to go with the most memorable moment is Canada. Because after we had swept everything else, we're like, oh, 4x1's a layup, right?
Nope.
So I'm going to go with Canada upsetting United
You see why you bring Blaine for my track and field episodes, because you're going to get that technical knowledge. Facts, not feelings, as I keep saying. Well, that's really Neil's lane. Same question, Daniel. The most memorable performance for you in this championships?
Yeah, objectively, you'd have to go with Sydney McLaughlin, but for me, it would be that the Jamaican sweep in the women's 100 meters. And it's even more memorable because Shelly and Fraser Pryce won. I think the fact that Elaine Thompson-Herah came off last season and we thought that she would possibly run 10-4. Jackson was our national champion. But for Shelly and Fraser Pryce to come on chip title in 2022 when she came on the scene in 2008, Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, LeBron James, Tiger Woods, those are athletes that have dominated for over a decade. Yeah. So to have a Jamaican woman to do that, especially at age 35, against a pretty stacked field, it's not like she's running against women who are running like 11-1 or low 10-9s. She's running against some of the fastest women in history. So to come away with a 5th world title and to almost think that she could have possibly even gone faster is almost crazy. So that Jamaican sweep led by Shelly and Fraser Pryce is my most memorable moment.
Bring it home, Marsha. Bring it home. What's the most memorable moment for you?
I mean, so being there would be will end up being a top 5 life moment altogether, generally. So got to see all my faves, saw 3 world records with my own eyes. But being biased, I have on my blue shirt, even though I see the Justin shirt, I have on my blue shirt today. The most memorable moment for me has to be Shade Williams winning World Championship bronze in the women's 400 meters. National record time, 49.75, the first Barbadian female to win a world championship medal. Like it, to see that with my own, because you always knew, she was hitting at it. She was getting closer. She was getting closer. She just missed out on the Olympic final, having the infamy of being the fastest semi-finalist not to have made a final. Like who wants to have that to their name, and now to come on the biggest stage, break 50, because she was always trying to get under 50. The national record prior to that was 50.11. So to get under 51, so you set a PB, set a national record, and you come away with a bronze medal in a quality field. This wasn't a full 400-meter field either. A quality 400-meter field, to see that blue, yellow, and black flying in Eugene. It was so funny. My Victoria, we were in full blue and yellow, jumping and screaming, lost voice, and people were actually cheering us, cheering her, because they were like, "You did a really good job cheering." That's how bad it was. So for me, definitely the most memorable moment. And then on that same night, being put out the venue because we were trying to stalk her to get a picture. Venue closed, they put us out, we still didn't get a picture. We stopped the exits, she eventually came out, and we got our picture. Probably got home. We left that venue that night probably at minutes 11. The meet finished after 8 o'clock. So you could understand there was a lot going on, but definitely for me, the most memorable moment.
And on top of that, of course, you can hear my accent that Barbados is home for me. So on top of that, not just Sade Williams' historic, being the first Bajan woman to win a world championship medal of any kind, but to send a very small team of 3 athletes and to see all 3 of them in the final. So I want to shout out also Jonathan Jones in the men's 400 meters, as well as Shane Brathwaite, who had the unfortunate situation of false starting. Possibly he could have been medal.
Well, Shane didn't false start. He was bumped.
Sorry.
He was bumped in his race, so he threw off his rhythm in the final. And he then ran a PB in the semi-final. He was really looking good. Hurdles had a lot of casualties, both men and women. So anything could have happened. And I think he knew, what, had I just had my chance, anything was possible as well.
Blaine will tell you in hurdles, anything goes, is execution on the day. So I just want to have those 3, right, on a small team of 3, and all 3 to make a major final. We're not talking about, let's be honest, there are events and then there are events. So to be in a women's final and get a medal, men's 400 final, a men's 110 hurdles final at the World Championship stage, I think it was great for my country. I mean, Blaine and Daniel, they're chuckling like, yeah.
They're accustomed to this.
Y'all here celebrate final.
That's big. No, it really was a very important feat, I think, for Barbados to just even, the one medal is massive. But I think
and shout out to Jamaica because Sade trains there as well with MVP.
Go ahead, Blaine.
I was just gonna say that it gives the rest of the country something to look forward to, right? It gives that acknowledgement and gives that opportunity and motivation towards the younger generation. Say, hey, this is a path. It may not be the path that people are accustomed to, or would even be one that they would think of, right? But now that they have seen it, this World Championships, this is going to be a huge growing stone for the track and field in Barbados, I believe.
One would only hope. You were going to say something, Daniel.
Yeah, Blaine makes a great point. There was a point here in Jamaica's history where for us to even make it past the semifinals was seen as a great achievement. And then we got to the 90s where we had more athletes competing in finals and winning medals. Then the 2000s, then 2009 at that World Championships where we just started to have like a flood of athletes competing at a very high level. So I think every country, especially small country, needs to go through this type of period where they see at least one person do it and think, oh, I can do it too. So maybe if more of them train in Jamaica, they would win medals. No, but jokes aside, I definitely think that it's great, and I hope that Shelly inspires some of these young girls in high school and primary school and those things to really push them to get to a stage where in the next decade, we'll be talking about Barbados competing with Jamaica, who knows? But it's good to start somewhere because everyone needs that foundation.
And it's good to end right here. What else to end with than talking about Barbados and a world champion? So for the newcomer, Daniel, thank you so very much for coming on, and especially at such late notice. We always do here. Plug yourself, tell the people how to find you and what you got coming up next.
All right, so you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Danny Beegie. That's DANNYBEEGIE. You can also tune in to Sports Talk on Love 101 FM. You can go on YouTube and Facebook and find that every Saturday, 1 to 2 p.m. Jamaica time, 2 to 3 Eastern time. And yeah, just continue watching sports wherever you are, and I'll find you.
People find you too, Daniel. Thank you so much. Playing like your family on the show, but still, plug yourself.
All right, bro. Appreciate you. Find the Final Whistle on Instagram and TikTok, Final Whistle Sports Pod on Facebook. You know, we're on all platforms. We are in the middle of our NFL divisional breakdown. We just dropped our NFC South episode this past weekend. The West is this week, so be on the lookout for that breakdown of the NFC West, especially with everything going on with Kyler's contract fiasco. So be on the lookout for a nice hot take, and my brother won't be Arizona Cardinals fan, so it'll be good to.
I mean, my part this whole she doesn't have.
I was about to ask, though. I get to plug myself too. Like,
Well,
do I don't understand? What
Go
is this?
right ahead, please.
So make sure to tune into this just in. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube. Follow us, like, comment, share, subscribe, and all of that good stuff. Go ahead, Justin.
You've done that so great, so I don't need to do that. But what I need to do, one of our sister channels, that is Go Talk with Marcus. This week or this weekend, he is celebrating 2 years. That is right.
I'm on that episode.
You are indeed on that episode. So, yes, even if you don't know who Marcus will watch Blaine, that is Go Talk with Marcus, a sister episode. That guy is like family on this. No, not like. He is family here, so go check it out. Go Talk with Marcus on all socials, wherever you watch your podcast. It would be remiss of me, one of my heroes. So rest in peace, Bill Russell, the great Bill Russell, passed at the age of 88. I don't think we talk about him enough. A lot of people don't realize he was a 5-time MVP, but forget 7 championships that he's won on the court. I know Marsh is a big Boston Celtics fan, so that really hurt. But it is for what he did off the court for me that really made him a true. You're not going to get a bigger social justice warrior than indeed the great Bill Russell, who has fought and having to play in a socially segregated Boston during the 50s and 60s doesn't get any worse than that. And to champion social rights, he was there when the late great, my name's failing me right now, Muhammad Ali, when he went against getting drafted, he had no bigger support than. And we talk about, the social responsibilities of our athletes, and he would have been one of the pioneers. So I just want to say rest easy, and our greatest condolences to the family and friends and the entire NBA family for the passing of Bill Russell. With that being said, for Daniel, for Blaine, for Marsha, I'm Justin of #ThisJustin signing out. Be sure to tune in next Monday. I think we will resume our NFL coverage at some point, but talk athletics when we get a chance, right? Good night, everyone.
Number one sport.
I don't have a mark on my face, and I upset Sonny Liston, and I just turned 22 years old. I must be the greatest. I told the world, I talk to God every day. The God's with the king over here, just the same. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I shook up the world.
I said, can I be a legend? Search your soul and answer me this question. Do you think I have what it takes to be great, but still be humble and learn from my mistakes? Shit.